rockets. Everybody object to the idea because it looks science fiction, but we establish a team, and we get some money, and have started to work. Took us about 2 years to get all the money needed to full-scale development and buying few batteries. This is how they start. The ignition, the incentive was because people started to get killed in Israel. They shoot rocket in Israel, not in this mass, but forecasting the future. I thought that we have to find a solution to protect Israeli life.
Were it not for something called Iron Dome, there would be buckets of blood spilling into the streets of Israel. This while the terrorist group Hamas denies a chance at a ceasefire in the Middle East. Amid reports they are using their own people as human shields and tossing blame back at Israel. The shooting has escalated again, and the truth is indeed hard to come by at the moment. Let's learn a little bit more. Let's welcome back to MidPoint Senior Fellow at the London Center for Policy Research, New York Times best-selling author and Bronze Star Medal Award winner, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer joins us. Lieutenant Colonel, thanks for being back with us.
Ed, thank you for having me. Good to be on.
Egypt is now involved. They are the ones who decided to try and broker some sort of a peace here. Did the Egyptian proposal have any chance of success whatsoever?
I think it did. I think if Hamas was actually concerned about its people, the Palestinian people, it would have taken the deal. With that said, it's very clear, Ed, from their rejection that the Palestinian individuals who are running Hamas have no interest in their people. This is about them trying to prove a point. The Egyptian deal, from what I can tell, was very well thought. The Israelis are ready to sign up to it. And I believe, and I'll be very blunt on this, that the Hamas wants more blood, and they want to try to convince the United Nations to come in. They are actually hiding weapons, these missiles, in the basements of common everyday folks, hoping that the Israelis will strike those houses and you'll have then quote-unquote civilian dead bodies. So it's all a sham on their part, and frankly, that's what they want. That's why they don't want the ceasefire.
We're hearing a lot of reports as well that Israel is calling certain homes and certain places, certain residences. They are warning them when they are going to launch missiles against them. And then the reports indicate that Hamas is telling the individuals, Palestinians, their own people, to stand on the roof and stay in that building. Do you hear the same thing?
Absolutely. That's the example of exactly what we're talking about here. We're talking about techniques which were actually perfected by Saddam Hussein during the first and second Gulf Wars with him. This is murder by your own, at the hand of your own leadership. The Israelis have the right of self-defense. I think everyone agrees on it, even John Kerry. With that said, when the Israelis go about trying to do the hard work of actually going after these missiles, that's when the real challenge starts. And this is where Hamas, again, is doing everything it can to prompt this worldwide, especially UN reaction to say, woe is me, we're the victims here. And the reality is they are, and again, doing everything they can to pick at the Israelis, try to continue to see their civilians dead for no other reason except to prove a political point.
Tony, you mentioned this is murder. This doesn't sound like murder. This sounds like genocide. This has happened before, where Hamas has been in these fights with Israel in the past. I believe it's 08, 09, and then 2012, we had certain wars, again, small wars, if you will. What are they trying to prove other than martyrdom at this point that they did not prove in the past and trying to push now?
I think they're trying to leverage the UN, believe it or not. And here's my thought on this, and see if your audience will agree with me or not. If you recall Bosnia-Herzegovina and the days where Yugoslavia was actually trying to draw in the United Nations, once they drew in the United Nations, the UN then became essentially pawns that allowed for the Yugoslav government to do more acts of badness. With the UN present, you have basically a resource that you can use to leverage. If you were during the 90s, your audience may recall that they actually had French peacekeepers chained to targets that we were getting ready to take out. So I think that's what Hamas wants to have happen. And the reason they're doing it is because that gives them more ability to build terrorist capacity. It's very clear that the Iron Dome system is very effective. So what they're trying to do is build more capacity to try to overwhelm the dome. And so you see this escalation, if you will, of tactics trying to get one up over the other. So I think that's where Hamas is actually going with this. This is part of a long-term strategy.
You mentioned Iron Dome. And now, is it fair to say, and certainly we have seen them, I believe they've intercepted all but one missile, maybe two. I don't have the exact figures in front of me right now. Is it fair to say that the Israelis have perfected this now? And this is something, if you go back to the Reagan and Gorbachev days, this is something that maybe America and other countries should have taken a long, harder look at, because it certainly is working.
This is an interview I did with another station just earlier today, Ed. I mentioned the very thing you just said, is that this was what Ronald Reagan envisioned for Star Wars or SDI. And it's interesting that the Israelis have perfected it. I'm hearing it's about 90% effective. And let's remember, Ed, they don't go after the incoming missiles, which are not basically destined to hit anything of interest. They'll let missiles go if it's going to hit some field. This is not 100% effective, but it doesn't need to be. It needs to be about 90%, as that's what they've got. We're learning a lot from it. This is good news. This is the only good news piece, is the Israeli people are being protected, and we are learning a great deal about what we need to do now regarding missile defense, regarding Iranian missiles potentially, North Korean missiles, and this sort of thing. So I think this is the only good news. But the issue, obviously, is that Hamas really does want to continue to overwhelm that system with more missiles. And again, that's why I see them trying to push for more capacity to launch these sorts of attack in the long run.
Is America militarily and politically ready for an Iron Dome system?
Yes. Yes and no. It's a political narrative, Ed, that's lacking. I work with Ambassador Hank Cooper, who runs who ran SDI under George Bush 41. And Hank is a dear friend and been working this issue for years. Yes, this is something that we've tried to get the Navy to take on. The Aegis destroyers can actually do a great deal of this. There's other land-based systems we can use. It's ready for prime time, but it's the political will issue, Ed, that's lacking. And this is something that's both sides, both the House and Senate and the White House have not been willing to actually move forward rapidly with. But this is something very much within the realm of potential at this point in time.
There are those in Israel, those in the Middle East, who have told Secretary of State John Kerry, stay home. Don't bother coming over here. We don't need you. Do you see any real involvement other than behind the scenes at the moment for American support of Israel?
The bottom line is it goes beyond Kerry. It goes to the White House directly. We the United States have essentially abandoned our role as essentially the arbiter. And I don't mean the policeman of the world. I mean, we have been there for our allies to basically try to protect them as best we can. This is especially true of nuclear deterrence, which is now also at jeopardy of being of being completely ignored by our adversaries. For better or for worse, our nuclear umbrella, the process of deterrence, has kept the world safe from nuclear weapons for the past 50 plus years. As we start seeing ourselves pull out of attempting to resolve the hard things like Syria, like Libya, some of the situations we help create, we then become diminished in our ability to support our allies. And John Kerry is emblematic of that. He does not want to see us actually do the hard work of resolving things. He simply seems to want to place blame on others, and even made the comment to the media that he feels that he gets upset or concerned when people talk about American exceptionalism. And the American exceptionalism is really just us leading by example. That's it. And the moment we don't lead by example, others out there who are adversaries will fill that space very rapidly. And I think it's a sad statement to see us falling back as we are, not taking the leadership roles we need to in these situations.
It sounds to me if we wanted somebody brokering peace in the Middle East, John Kerry's the wrong guy to do it.
I can think of a handful who would be extraordinarily well gifted, but at this point, based on the way he said things about the Israeli apartheid, he has said other things which have really concerned our allies about his willingness to support them. The Egyptians, which have been a great ally, they attempted here with Hamas to insinuate themselves and bring a peaceful coexistence into existence for the ceasefire. John Kerry is not the right man for the job. And simply put, if it continues in this direction, we will see more failures, even graver failures, over the next 2 years of this administration.
90 seconds we have left here. How long can this go on? Because Hamas, they are getting missiles, they are being fed weapons, but how long can this go on? We keep giving Patriot missiles to the Israelis, so you would think that they would be able to outlast Hamas.
Well, the answer is probably, but it's a very expensive way of doing it. And plus, it's like a cancer. You can continue to cut the growth off, but if you don't get at the root of the cancer, Ed, it'll continue to grow back. So this is where I'm going to say this as directly as I think I can get away with. The Israelis may have to consider going in ground-wise to secure certain territory. And I'm not encouraging an Israeli invasion. They've been doing some things with special operations forces. But the bottom line is this. As long as that group, Hamas, continues to exist, continues to be able to insinuate itself and use these rockets as a method of terror, you will continue to see this problem. And as you point out, it's happened over cycles. It happens and goes away for a couple of years, it comes back. There needs to be a permanent solution to this issue. And if I were an Israeli citizen, I would encourage my government to resolve this one way or another and be done with it. It's great they have the Iron Dome. It's great we're learning from it. But I'm telling you, Ed, I don't think I'd be sitting here in Fairfax County, Virginia, enjoying life if I had rockets flying over my house, even if I thought they weren't going to hit me every 10 minutes.
15 seconds left. Do you think we need to keep an eye on Syria as well in all this?
Syria, their destabilization of that, and the ISIS is another symptom of the larger problem of us not stepping in and trying to help resolve things favorably.
It again still comes down to the fact that we haven't done the right thing at the beginning in order to lead us here. It is still that A to Z arrow, that line, no matter how you want to slice it. It's the way it happens
Absolutely.
in every conflict. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, it is always a pleasure, my friend. Let's do it again real soon.
Thank you, Ed. Thanks for having
All
me.
right, thank you very much. Again, the missiles are flying in Gaza. The latest reports that have come down is, you may have heard them, you may not, Egypt has proposed peace. Hamas said no. More missiles started to fly. Apparently there were 50 more missiles that Israel saw incoming from Hamas. So the Israelis have said, we will not be talking peace. We're talking a whole lot more when we continue right here on MidPoint.